Okay, good evening, everyone. It is 6:02 p.m. on Wednesday, November 19, 2014. Call to order the meeting of the San Francisco Elections Commission. First order of business is a roll call. Commissioner Rowe?
Here.
Commissioner Drudonic?
Here.
Commissioner Junk?
Here.
Commissioner Safant?
Here.
And I'm Commissioner Matthews. I am here. And Commissioner Yu has been in touch with me to say that the weather has caused some problems with her travel. She'll be here very soon. Item number 2, public comment on any issue within the Elections Commission general jurisdiction unless otherwise included in an item on this agenda. The lovely and talented Gerard Gleason is joining us.
First of all, I want to tell you guys some better things to do on Wednesday night, I swear to God. One thing, I just want to come down here because this was months ago I talked to Chris Drudonic about this. The foundation I work for funds a lot of democracy projects, and one of the things we funded was there were conferences put on by Common Cause, and I put one on in December that I went to called How the West is Winning, and it was basically Western States Election Administration. We had the Secretary of State from Oregon, Washington, Colorado. We had the Federal Election Assistance people. We had the Registrar from LA, Orange County, San Diego, as well as King County, Albuquerque, with people from all over. Groups like the ACLU were there, people who typically sue election officials over various issues. So it was a kind of getting together thing. It's sort of based on what that group in California, Future California Election is doing. In fact, I sat with the deputy director for that. I just want to say I saw a lot of really amazing and cool things there. One of the things I noticed that a lot of states are going to vote by mail. And one of the phenomenal things that jumped out at me is Colorado's going to vote by mail. They had, in their spring primary, they had 20 provisional ballots in the whole state. The whole state. I had 21 in the last election in my precinct. But some of the groups are talking about maybe the whole vote by mail isn't a good thing because there got to be people who are falling through the cracks on something like that when they only have 20 provisional ballots in the whole state. So those are some of the issues we talked about. And I actually got an opportunity to tour the Denver Department of Elections, which I have to say I was slack-jawed over a couple of things. One is I'd spent a year with Chandra Fries, who's a member of the public, who had a lot of issues we discussed about vote by mail tracking and videoing and blah, blah, blah. And they were doing absolutely every single thing she was asking for. But, of course, they don't run precincts. They're doing vote by mail. That's where the funding is coming. The other thing, and what I passed out here, that just floored me is they've got, and I'm sure the director's probably seen these things, they're testing out an accessible voting device, which is an off-the-shelf iPad running the Apple platform, which is 27 languages, has vision, motion, speaks, blah, 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 $400 for the unit. It's not our big SDRE. It prints the ballot out. In fact, on the picture here, it has actually printed it out on demand, a ballot upside down. That's what they're processing. This thing doesn't record the vote. It's a ballot marking device. Basically, it's an expensive pencil. That's a $400 pencil, not a $4,000 pencil. So just some things to be aware of. This is company. It's, everybody counts or everyone counts. There's probably controversies about what they're doing, too. But just to give you an idea of things that are coming down the pipe. So that was just a couple of things I wanted to share with you. One of the people as I walked away from Denver Department of Elections said, well, how does this compare to San Francisco? And I was like, I said, to be honest with you, I'm not sure that San Francisco can even afford to be in San Francisco. That was a distressing thing. They had all this fancy blah, 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 and, San Francisco scraping by. So anyway, I just wanted to come in and share some of that. As soon as I get video from Common Cause that they took of some of the presentation, and particularly these machines and things like this, they had a vote by mail where it comes in and the signature is covered up, and there's a machine that perks and sucks off the piece so that they can verify the signature without opening the envelope. And therefore, people's signature is not going through the mail. I was just for it. Those are some things that Commissioner Matthews has talked about in the past. These things were handled, again, with money, but because they're not doing precinct operations. But I wouldn't advocate getting rid of precinct operations. Thank you.
Thank you. And seeing no further public, and yep. Thank you, Gerard. And it raised an issue we had talked about before. It's been 3-ish years on the print on demand interesting system. Thank you. Item 3, approval of minutes from the previous meeting. May I have a motion?
Sure.
Thanks.
I move to approve the minutes of the October 15th Elections Commission meeting.
And is there a second?
I second that motion.
Thank you. Is there any commissioner comment? Is there any? Commissioner Rowe?
I would like to see up at the top where the attendance is, I'd like to see the words 7-month with deleted.
Any other commissioner comment on that issue? So that will fail for lack of a second. All right. Any further commissioner comment? Any public comment?
Oh, hold on one second. I
Okay.
just want to see what's being referenced. And Commissioner Rowe, which can you point out what's being referenced?
In the very first paragraph, third line in after Joan, 7th month with, I think it should just be no appointee of the Board of Education.
I second that motion.
So it's been moved and seconded. So now let me write down the language, Jill.
The specifics were just delete the 3 words, 7th month with.
7 month with. Okay. I don't have any strong feelings about it. I would like it to stay. That's why I put it in to begin with. But okay. I mean, I would like it to stay. Are there any other commissioner comments?
I would have liked it to stay because it is the 7th month without.
So a vote. Hang on. So on the motion to amend the minutes by deleting the word 7th month with. 7th month with or 7th month without?
I think 7th month with. Because,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So on the motion to amend to delete 7th month with, Commissioner Rowe,
Yes.
Commissioner Jordanic.
Yes.
I vote no. Commissioner Safant.
No.
Commissioner Yu.
Yes.
And Commissioner John.
Yes.
Okay. So it's adopted and those 3 words will be deleted. Now on the main motion to approve the minutes, any further commissioner comments? Any public comments? Commissioner minutes, Commissioner Rowe.
Yes.
Commissioner Jordanic.
Yes.
Commissioner Savant.
Yes.
Commissioner Yu.
Yes.
Commissioner John.
Yes.
And I also vote yes. Item number 4, review of the November 4, 2014 election. Commissioners want to begin? Commissioner Jordanic?
Sure. So I'll just begin just listing out the activities I participated in related to observing. And I was a polling place inspector for precinct 7845. And I went into City Hall to observe the canvass the week after the election. And I also observed the loading of the VBM ballots at City Hall the following morning. And then I went to the Pier warehouse and observed the unloading of the ballots there and spent some time at the canvass. And I also went to Alameda County and watched their 1% random selection, and just for comparison purposes with San Francisco. And I observed the 1% random selection here at City Hall. And today I observed the 1% manual tally at the warehouse. And for this election, there were a number of what I would consider like very substantial improvements over the last election. And a lot of these are around transparency and auditing. I'll just highlight a few of them. But one thing is that all of the ballots were included in the 1% manual tally, which I know it took the department a lot of work, and they had to come up with new processes for that. But from what I saw, I thought they did a an excellent job with that, and they pulled it together really well. And they also, on the website, they released the precinct level totals, the preliminary statement of votes, as a machine-readable file in an open format. It was a tab-delimited file. And that was also a first for the department. It was very useful because before, it was usually just a very long PDF that was hundreds of pages long. But with the TSV, you could open that in Excel and crunch the numbers if you wanted to. And they also waited until all the ballots were counted before doing the random selection. And then, of course, the preliminary totals were available on the website, so the public could download those totals before the selection and save them. And then also, this year they did the random selection using 10-sided dice. And this process is considered by some to be a best practice. And it was a faster process than using the cards drawn out of a box. And it was, and you could see that the dice were being rolled. It was visibly random. So those are some of my observations. There's some more I'd like to look at in terms of what we received on Friday, but I also have some questions. I don't know if maybe we should do comments before questions, but I don't know if anyone has a preference.
Not knowing what your question is hard to say.
Okay. Well, I have a bunch of questions. Maybe I'll just go through these then. Let's see. So the questions are, at the last commission meeting, we discussed the damaged VBM ballots, and then you had said that the post office hadn't yet given you a reason for the damage. Have you heard from the post office yet?
Yeah, so the issue was that the envelope we use for the vote by mail ballots is, even though it's a large envelope, it's still considered within the range for letter size, which you would send out, your rent check, whatever. But we, with the 5-card ballot folded into that envelope, it's much thicker than what the post office contemplated its letter-sized processing equipment to process. In the past, what the post office has done is they process these larger packets on their flat size equipment, the bigger envelope, bigger pieces of mail. And for this time, that didn't happen. So whoever was running the equipment put all the ballots on the letter size, didn't pay any attention to the impact on the larger packet going through the letter size equipment that was designed for the smaller pieces of mail. And so that's why the exterior envelopes were revved up the way they were. So it hasn't happened in the past. 230-some thousand envelopes went through the machine. No one even said anything. It actually wasn't until the envelopes, the packets got to the branches. I think one of the branches contacted the main office on the street. So the ballots are produced in Washington, and they're dropped. They're dropped in the post office and everywhere, but they're dropped on for the mail stream on Evans Street here in San Francisco. So Evans Street is where the processing occurred and where the damage occurred, but no one at that site knows what happened. Which actually, though, is pretty impressive, because if their equipment can pull those packets through and be just crunching those envelopes, that's a lot of power. So, and I can't see it happen. But so that's the reason for that. So I'll just leave it to that. I won't go down here.
Okay, so as far as corrective action, is there anything that either the department needs to do the next time, or the post office itself, or was this kind of a one-time fluke?
Well, I don't think it'll happen next election. I think the post office is fresh enough in their memory that it won't happen. Mm-hmm. I'll have to say the post office, for the first time, stepped forward and offered reimbursement to the department for the damage. That never happened before. And I think you might have a question on another matter later on in the post office, so I'll kind of go into another post office week. So the post office really, in its own way, stepped forward, even though its actions caused the situation. They also sought to remedy the problem as well. So I think, with that said, next November we won't have the issue. But also, this demonstrates too that these 5-card ballots that we have to stop this. With Filipino coming on as a 4th language, we can't go quadrilingual ballots. We would have had like a 10-card ballot. We couldn't have done it. The post office's equipment couldn't have handled it. Our equipment couldn't have handled it. We wouldn't have enough space to process it. The list goes on. So we need to actually have smaller ballot packages going forward. I think we'll need to go to bilingual ballots starting next November in 2015, since the department's obligated to provide election materials in Filipino. So that's one issue, that the ballot packets on our side have to become smaller, because they're causing problems, not just with the post office, but with other vendors that can deal with our ballots. The ballot printing vendor, sorting machine we have in the office. Then also, I think there has been a change in the post office. I really think they understand their impacts, and I think they understand they need to change their view on their impact on mail. And so I'm trying to get a meeting with people who make decisions there. I want to discuss their business model with them. I don't think they're that far away to really making the changes that, one, they track the ballots better, because one thing I noticed is that there's a barcode on my garage door of my house. Every time the post office person comes to my house, he or she scans that barcode. Well, there's a barcode on our ballot. Can there be a compatible scan on that ballot as it goes into the resident's mailbox, or in my situation, the garage door spot? I don't know. Is there a way that we can piggyback our process, our barcoding, scanning stuff with theirs, so they can report back, not just to us, but themselves as well, and can track things better? So I'm trying to get that, because there seems to be a desire to have greater awareness and to run their business better. So I think on our side, a smaller packet, and I think on their side, to consider their business model, how it relates to ballots specifically, not the entire junk body, but just for ballots. So yeah, I think there's things we can do to voice that in the future.
Okay. Secondly, did you use any non-employees for this election as requested in the waiver?
Oh no, no, just the folks that were there or you weren't there at McAllister Street to read the memory devices. That's it.
Okay. One question I received from some members of the public is, and this was, I see this was actually in the election plan, and there was also an announcement about it. There's a decision that you made to release the preliminary RCV reports only at the end of election night, whereas I think in 2002 you were able to release a preliminary report for RCV at the first tally and also at the last tally. So I was wondering if you could just share a little bit of your thinking on that, or the decision behind that.
That's Mr. Carey's question. Honestly, I don't remember doing it in 2012. And so we came to this election and we planned on releasing the RCV at the end of the night, and we had as much information as possible to release. Mm-hmm. I didn't even remember, no one did, releasing it with the first report with the vote-by-mail ballots in 2012. It wasn't a policy decision, it just, we don't recall even doing it. So, yeah.
Okay. And is there a reason that we couldn't if we wanted to?
Oh, we could have done it.
Okay.
And there was no opposition to the idea of it.
Okay. So another kind of related issue is that I know there was also an article in the Chronicle about it, but there were like technical issues with the website on election night. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the server is off-site for our website for the content that we designed. It's off-site. It's in San Mateo, and the capacity, the RAM that we had on that server got exceeded. And really, it's a matter of, it's a symptom of our own success in providing information on the website. So, like, if you saw pictures in the paper of the parties the candidates are having at the election night, they were directly tied into our website. What they were showing wasn't anything they designed, it was our website page, and they were refreshing it. And then also people on their phones and everything, we're trying to get into it. Then even media, later on, we realized that media locations were doing the same thing. There's scraping is a term which, I guess that's where you were showing our site. And then there's another term which I can't remember, where the media, like if they say, well, election results, click here. When you click, they're coming into our site. We're going into their server. So different services were coming into our server using our memory, not their own, to provide the information. And we didn't expect this. And also we had the NFC, the near-field communication, coming in with the cell phones and the roster bags to some polling places. And then we had an application that the Feds were using on the field. So this is all coming into that server. And we had used this for presidential elections, this amount of memory, so no one expected that was about an hour and 15 minutes, I think it was, where it got really slow to the point where somebody stopped. So we've already remedied that. We've octupled the amount of memory, and then we're also getting a backup server connected at election time with it's the max memory you can have for these servers. So if the first server with the greater amount of memory were to have too much activity, we could quickly go into a second server with the same amount of memory and like by 16 times increase the amount of memory that would be available for our website functions.
Okay. Next question is about the IRIS report. As a polling place inspector, I know there was one phone call I made to the election department that I considered a noteworthy event, and I didn't see it in the IRIS report. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, what determines whether something is included in the IRIS report.
Usually, if there's a need for resources, then we'll put it in. But if we can answer the question on the phone, a lot of times we don't actually want people to have to type in something they can respond to on the phone to not take the next call. So especially in the morning and the evening. So.
Okay. So the next question is, you had alluded to it, but a member of the public sent an email to the full commission, and it was part of the agenda packet. This was an email that was regarding a vote by mail ballot that was cast from Australia, and the voter, this was cast back in late September, and then the ballot was returned to the voter as undeliverable, so they weren't able to cast their vote. And were you able to find out the answer to that, the cause of that?
Yeah, I did actually before the meeting. So I followed up when I got your email. I followed up with the post office that they have their primary business representative at the post office. And this is a sign that the post office is changing a little bit, because I was not really hopeful I get response that was as detailed eventually and as quick. So it took a few emails, but finally today the post office came back and admitted that the redirection of this ballot back to Australia from, I guess, California was indeed their fault. It shouldn't have happened. There was nothing wrong. The post office didn't think anything was wrong with the formatting on the envelope, original envelope. There was nothing wrong with the barcode that was on the envelope. The barcode wasn't reading the information that indicated the sender's address, and used the correct information barcode to come back to the department. So the post office, they looked at the photo that the voter sent to the commission that you forwarded to me, and admitted that it was wrong. It shouldn't have happened, and they apologized. So I contacted the voter today, actually, before I got the last response from the post office, saying we're following up on it. The commission sent this to me. And then, by the time that I finished sending emails, I got the final response from the post office, and I followed up and sent and I copied and pasted the post office's response in relation to the voter's complaint on receiving her ballot in Australia after she sent it to us in San Francisco.
Okay, and just 2 more questions. This is a question I didn't ask for the last election, but how many cases did you refer this election to the DA's office?
None.
None? Okay.
Well, one.
One.
Yeah, one. There's one. Yeah.
Okay. And lastly, is there anything else noteworthy about this election that you want to share?
We have to decrease the number of cards in these absentee ballot packages. It has to end. It has to end. The problems it causes from the very beginning to the very end of the processing, and the impact on the preparations for the elections, the impact on equipment, the impact on planning, the impact on people, the impact on storage. It's too much. And, we've known this for a while. It's not news to us, but I think we've worked with this long enough to really say we're experts, and we've met our match. We just can't go this back anymore. And I know there's always concerns every election, but operationally, and then as Commissioner Gleason has noted, the use of mail increases, we can't make it harder on the vendors, on the post office, on the voters, and ourselves to vote and get these ballots to and from us and the voters. It has to end. So, and again, the way to do that is to go to bilingual ballots, which will be a change. So we're going to, and we've already prepared a base plan to start to, move this through the various outlets and get people informed about this so they understand. So it's not a sudden change. Some won't know about it. Some won't. That'll happen as much as we can to make this transition and make it so people understand why it's happening. It's not a language issue. It's an operational issue. So that's one thing that really stands out in my mind for this election. And also just the impact that it's amazing what this department does, because you get the 5-card ballot and what it costs us, and then you have the Giants take away more than that, 2/3 of your space you've allocated for your warehouse operation, and it happens pretty much 2 days before you're about to get 250 vehicles delivered to you. And then you're trying to change all your processes, and then we made the adjustments when we got into it. So it was pretty impressive. This was a pretty impressive election actually on many levels, despite I guess I'll wait. So well anyway, the size of the ballot, and I think also the flexibility and the alacrity with which the department responds to issues most impressed me and stand out for this election. And the final thing is on that memory with the server. It was like an hour and 15 minutes. It wasn't that long. And I get it. I don't understand. But you would think tech, with objective. But it was such an emotional response that we got that our server was not performing as expected at that specific time. And it was really incredible. It was really incredible to ride that wave of emotion for that little bit of time. And then, and then it just dissipated, went away. And then every interview that I had, every question that I had regarding the election for 2 or 3 days after election night, the very first question I had was on the server. It wasn't on how the vote was going. It wasn't on, vote by mail ballots. It was like the server. And that really surprised me. So that's a good lesson. Because that means that our presentation is the critical point for many people to enter the election process in San Francisco. So,
Okay, thanks.
Next, Commissioner Drudonic. Other commissioner comments? Commissioner Yu.
Just a quick follow-up question. By the solution to decreasing the size of the ballot cards and moving to bilingual ballots, so does that mean that it would be in the person's requested language as well as English?
right.
Okay.
Great. Go ahead.
And would that be on the voter registration records? You can be able to
Right.
find that.
The initial thought now, we have to aggressively campaign and get the word out. And then that's the challenge. You have to reach the people that you normally can't probably reach. The ones who don't pay attention no matter what you do to get the word out to them. To have people, if they need or want election materials in a second language besides English, to tell us. But the default ballot will be English Chinese, because our largest group of non-English speakers, or our largest group of people who want assistance in language other than English is Chinese speakers. And then right now it would be Spanish, and then it would be Filipino. So the default ballot would be English Chinese, then English Spanish, English Filipino would be more by request, I guess. So at the polling places, since the table space is limited, but we would have turned a 5-card ballot into maybe a 2.5-card ballot this election. So you'd have probably, in those really tight polling places, the English-Chinese ballots would be presented for sure, and then probably you have the English, Filipino, English, Spanish stacked more, piled on the table for presentations purposes. That's an initial thought.
Thank you.
So this would apply to both the vote by mail ballot cards as well as precinct
Right.
ballot cards.
Right. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question and comments, observations. First, with respect to the website slowness, I know the most serious portion, the duration of the problem was about for that hour, 15-minute window. But just checking the website the next day, it continued to be very slow, at least in my experience the next day. And I had some colleagues test it out, and it also was slow. So, to the degree that coupling the amount of memory and getting a backup server is if that's the real solution, that'd be great. But it'd be nice to firewall that and have some intensive testing to figure out to make sure that that's actually the case. During the election, I visited 12 polling places. The 13th was closed. I think that was 7317. It wasn't apparent. Actually, the mobile I accessed, tried to figure out where the replacement polling place was, and the mobile application actually worked very well. What I was looking for in the evening, and I just tried to observe those tangible aspects of change in this November 4 election as set out the election plan versus the prior election. And so kind of the things that I thought poll workers might notice were the kiosks, the issue with the $1,000 card limit, and then also whether there was any experience with the mobile mix mass text messaging service that we rolled out this time around. The new voter information kiosks were, I think most of the reaction was that they were attractive, but perhaps a little big. And so there was one polling place, I think it was 7308, where it actually didn't even fit within the garage space, and so they put it into a side room. And there were some mixed reactions with respect to whether it was easier or more difficult to set it up. I'd say the plurality of reactions was that it's actually a little bit more difficult. I can give you some feedback on kind of the specifics. As I understood it, one of the most heavily trafficked polling places was, I think it was either 7329 or 7331, and at the time of the evening that I visited that polling place, even that polling place with the 4-card ballot wasn't close. Vote didn't look like it would exceed the $1,000 card limit. So I'm not sure if anyone experienced that, that limitation. And then I also asked around with respect to the mass text messaging. No one got a text message as far as I heard.
Yeah, some polling places did do the ballot transfer, but it wasn't as much. But 60% of the vote was from vote by mail. 230 voted, and 140 were from polling places, I believe, 140 from EVM and 90 from the polls.
By the way, with respect to the website, in addition to the issue of slowness, I did hear some comments on the usability of our site and the way information is organized, and just how time-consuming it is to access the relevant information. So I would like to sit down with you and come up, figure out an intelligent way to see if there are easy fixes.
Yeah, everyone's got an opinion, and No, I
That's true, though.
don't mean that, and I don't know the best way to do this, but I've also asked Commissioner Don to give his feedback. He did prior to the election, we didn't have time to even to consider. So what I'm really trying to get across, if folks, not you, but the people that you've spoken to, if they could write down and share that, because we have to go back to the website after selection, and we have to take a look at it. And the more feedback we can get, we're going to send out a very basic 5-question survey that we're going to send out and put on our website to try to get some feedback as well about the usability of our site, because it is an issue. I totally agree with you. And I don't know the absolute best way to do it, but I think the more feedback we can get, we'll probably start to see general trends of problems or concerns or complaints that people have. Maybe start there, yeah. That's a whole. Absolutely, I'd love to have you guys come in on that. So I don't know the best way to organize it right now, but I agree.
Yeah, there was a ton of public correspondence about that, the election night and the next morning as I was reviewing it about, why can't I find whatever?
Right.
And so there were just tons of forum responses, just cut and pasting the link. Just click on this link and it'll take you right to the election results. Right. And I remember, and I can't even estimate how many years ago, maybe 3-ish, really the last time I took any kind of a close look, there was a huge button on the screen for election results. It just said, click here for election results. And it was a gigantic chunk of real estate. And it was simple and clean. And you click on that and it takes you right to the election results, as opposed to these 2 long lines of text at the top that are hyperlinks to something, and one to the PDF format and one to HTML format, and that's what you have to click on, and it's on a screen with a whole bunch of other similar looking lines. And
That's your mobile? That's the mobile connection?
No, I was on my desktop, my laptop, but and it was just, I thought, I'm really motivated to find out, so I'll read all this stuff to find the link. But I remember when it was just this big old honking, election results button. Click, and that was great.
It's actually going to do that because actually the top third of our page, that entire panel, you click anywhere on that panel, it's going to take you to the results.
Didn't see it, yeah.
No, I mean it's
right.
like,
right.
But the fact that you were looking for a link and you didn't think to oops, I mean that's the kind of, I mean just things like that. I mean that's information that we need to hear. So
On that topic.
Yeah, go ahead. Hang on, Commissioner, you go ahead, and then Commissioner Rowe.
It would be nice to find out just some data, if it's possible, if IT tracks number of visits per link or per page, so we can get a sense of what are the most commonly asked things, and then provide kind of projections on, data capacity, access, or platforms.
Yeah, it's all Google Analytics, I think it is. I mean, I can shift that in your direction. Yeah, and the thing is, probably starting last week, the capacity needs have gone down to about almost 0. It spikes up for 3 days, maybe a week, and then one puts on our website to give us any feedback. Until they come back to the next election. Yeah, I can get that to you.
I think that would be interesting to know. Thank you.
Commissioner Rowe.
I was just going to make a quick comment on that. The other thing that I found a little bit difficult to figure out how to find was when you vote by mail and you can track your ballot.
Yeah.
It took some thinking.
Yeah.
To where would I go? And then I think you had to click on that, and then you had to click on the second thing, and then you had to click through to a third thing before you actually got there.
Yeah.
Once you get there, it's fantastic. I thought it was great. To be able to see. I checked it shortly after I voted, and because I dropped mine off at a polling place that day, and I think I checked it that night or the next day, and I could see how far you had already tracked it, and then I went back a few days later, and it was easy to follow the 5 or 6 different processes and the dates, and it inspired a lot of confidence on that. So I think that's a great one, but I would make it easier for people to find that.
Yeah.
Maybe no one else cares about that, but it's a really cool feature to make people know that their vote actually did get counted. So.
Yeah, I'm sure lots of people do care. I'm sure that's.
You'd be surprised. We had that in our carousel. We call it the carousel where the pictures change when you first come on until really election day, election night. Then the results, we just have the one panel up there for the results. And the traffic, I didn't like this election, but the previous election is not that high. And you could also, like in Alice Cyclones, there's this great table that we have on there. You can track all these balances. It was Commissioner Young's question, how do I know what's being counted every day compared to the result? And, it's just not looked at.
Well, one of the things, sorry.
I'm sorry, just on that very same topic,
Yeah.
it was also really great the way you access it, I thought, by putting in the street number part of your address, and then it asks you to verify your birthday, and so anyone can do that. I suppose somebody could check on somebody they know very well, but
Right.
you don't have to have your stuff,
Right.
you don't have to put in any
Right.
specific
Right.
information, so I liked the way that people
Yeah.
find themselves.
Yeah.
Well, on this point, you were just mentioning, one of the things I was trying to do and eventually just gave up, because I was kind of interested but didn't actually care, if that makes sense, is daily how many provisionals and vote by mails were still outstanding and how many were counted. And I couldn't, sort of find that. And
I'm reading it every day.
yeah, and I didn't, and I'm a subscriber, and for some reason, I wasn't getting that. But on the website, I couldn't somehow find, it was, I looked around a bit, but I didn't do an exhaustive search. But I know that out where I live, I imagine you were talking about the waves of emotion on election night. I think my sense is it was a little regional. Out where I live, in the outer Richmond, it was like Civil War, neighbor against neighbor on the issues of Propositions H and I. And I think over, diagonally opposite, there was a, waterfront something issue that was, or something pertaining to zoning that really no one in West San Francisco cared about. But yeah, the Pier 70 did. But which, over here would be, probably of great emotional import. So, it was, so on the Prop H&I thing, I was kind of trying to follow, is this pretty much a closed-proof gap now, or could it still be closed in theory, how likely, whatever. And I couldn't sort of make any sense out of that.
Yeah, the table doesn't distinguish between provisionals and vote by mail ballots, actually.
Right.
So we wouldn't know that.
But does it, I couldn't find where even it's just still outstanding anything. Any uncounted ballot still outstanding.
I just tried to make it as easy as possible when I was reading it.
Yeah.
And then when you tweet on the bottom right-hand corner of our website, so you can see all the tweets right there.
Missed those. All right, well, thanks. Any other commissioners on their observations before I do mine? All right.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I also, in the morning, shortly after opening, I went by 5 or 6 different polling places, and I heard similar comments about the kiosks. Some people thought they were really easy to set up, but the majority seemed to have thought it was a very challenging process to set them up. I don't know if it really was. Maybe they just weren't trained or it was new, but I did hear that from more than half of the polling places that I was at. One of the polling places, and I talked with you about this on election night, but one of the polling places said that they had 2 voters already. I was there at probably 8:30. They had 2 voters who had complete ballot cards with no votes on them. And what they said, this inspector said that when they fed those through the Insight machine, not only did it reject it, but it wouldn't allow them to put in the code to say accept it anyway. And they said it had happened twice and that they had ended up calling in, and in both cases the voters decided to just void out that ballot because there was nothing voted on it. But just a possible issue. I don't think it happens very often that there's an entire card with no votes on it, but it happened, or at least for this one polling place, twice. So wanted to alert you that might be some technical glitch, maybe not, but probably worth looking into. I got, just like the last election, people love the colored bags, so that seems to make the clerks and the inspectors happy. So I wanted to mention that. Then, as you know, I came down to City Hall at around probably around 5:30, and I stayed for a couple of hours. And I want to thank you for showing me around. I want to thank you for giving me the badge so I could access any place that I wanted. It was really it was really neat to see. If any of you haven't seen it, it's, everyone is working so hard, so diligent, so professional. I got to see you showed me the big machine that's, processing the vote by mail cards and pulling things out and rejecting them and accepting them and verifying signatures. It was really great. So I was impressed with really the dedication of the people down there and the seriousness with which everyone was taking in. The phone bank seemed to be working very well. So that was good. And then I went down to the warehouse and was able to get there shortly before the first sheriff arrived. So it was also quite impressive. Again, the workers that work these elections are very diligent, so professional, really trying to do a good job. They seemed very excited about it, and I thought it worked really well. I liked, I don't know if you've always done this, but the tracking with the reader, that they're reading all of the items in the vans before they...
RFID, that's the RFID.
Yeah, the RFID before anything even gets out of the van.
Right.
You're having them tag it to make sure that it's there.
Right.
And then it gets sent out, each piece gets sent out to its own little area, and then it gets tagged again. And then you have that scoreboard at the front, which was kind of neat, although it didn't quite seem to be matching for me. I was a little confused. It seemed like they should all come in fives, and they weren't for a while there, so I don't know if it was just maybe it was a timing issue. But anyway, I was very impressed with that process. I was impressed with the sheriffs, also very, on point, nobody wasting time, just there. They seemed to understand that there were delays. It was pretty cool to see all these rental vans. At one point there must have been, 100 of them, 100 lined up just waiting to get in, but none of the sheriffs seemed upset by the wait. They were very respectful of the workers who were trying to process the ballot. So I was impressed, and I want to thank you for giving me that access.
Great.
I did have some other questions. I don't know. So I wanted to. I looked through the IRIS report, and one of the concerns I had about that was that there were a number of places where the clerks or the inspectors were identified by name. And so sometimes there were accusations being made against somebody that's sort of like an employee accusation. And we don't know if it's true or if it's not true, but it didn't seem like the names should be in a public report. So I would ask you to consider whether whoever's entering that in might have another way to do that, where they don't put the name out for the public to see accusations that are being made.
We actually spend weeks in training and preparing to enter into IRIS and to understand how IRIS works on election day as far as the issues on election day. And we tell folks, watch your language. Just because someone calls in and says something, first of all, doesn't mean it's true. And then second, you don't want to be identifying people because IRIS was never meant to be everything we do is public, I get that. But the whole idea of IRIS was never really meant to be a public record. It was meant more for us to track what's going on. But this election, in the past, we would not issue names in it, but it was requested that we provide the report without doing any sort of editing to the information. So normally we don't put names in there for a public report like this. We would take it out to poll worker or clerk or inspector.
Yeah, and it might just be an issue. It may have been one person because it wasn't a lot of them. But
there were several. I read before the meeting.
Yeah, I would. Maybe that name doesn't need to be entered. Sometimes they identify people by numbers, which seems fine. But the name seems probably best left out. Also, on the emails that you provided, obviously took a lot of time to redact out those. I'm sure it's a lot of work, but it's also a process that's fraught with the potential for mistakes, and I did notice some. So I don't know if you have a second person go through it. I'm sure it's a tedious job, but I think it would benefit from having another read through to make sure that no addresses and email addresses and identifying information of that sort is being left in. Because there weren't a lot of those kinds of mistakes, but there certainly were some.
That's a timing issue because while we're processing ballots, we were trying to get information in to the commission for the agenda. So we switched from one day doing ballots to redacting so we could get it posted for your meeting. So, but normally we have a tracking.
One of the things that I noticed in the IRS report, I think there were 2 or 3 instances where the polling place reported that their Spanish language clerks didn't show up. And I think that in at least 2 of those instances, the end result was, well, there aren't really that many Spanish language needs at these polling places, so they did not end up getting a replacement. And I don't know, I wanted to ask you what the legalities are about that. Is there a legal requirement in certain places that they have a Spanish language clerk?
No, there's not a legal requirement. Well, if you have 3%, well, yeah, I mean, we have to have language assistance, and then if you don't have a poll worker who speaks the language, then we have to find other methods to provide the assistance. There's a formula that we've developed in, I guess, association with the Department of Justice over several years. Many years ago, we used to meet with the Department of Justice before every election, and we talk about our language access to polling places, and then we developed with their assistance a formula. It's not legal, it's not a statute, but it's something that we said we would do. So you draw the information from the registration. If someone was born, their country of origin is from a Spanish-speaking country, for instance, if there's a U.S. Spanish language system. So if there's more than 100, you have 1 poll worker. And if you have, let's say, 50 requests for information, in addition to the 100 people who were born in Spanish-speaking countries, you would have 2 poll workers. I saw a couple in here too. Now, my sense is that these weren't busy precincts, and that the busier precincts got the clerks. But then, at least one of the instances, we indicated to call that language line indicated. So they call into the department. So language line was calling us. It wasn't called some third-party service. It was called in to us, and then we could provide assistance for that voter via telephone. So yeah, I saw that too. And also, that's one of the challenges of recruiting the bilingual poll workers too. Spanish is a more difficult language to recruit than it is the Chinese-speaking poll workers. The Filipino-speaking poll workers, I'm kind of worried about that because that number is actually small for the number of precincts to which we must assign. But even then, it's like we're really pushing to get that number before the election. So yeah, it's not a matter of us not wanting to, or not recruiting. And then we had sufficient numbers going into the election, but then you get the cancellation.
Right.
And then what surprised me is I've never seen those instances for a general election. That for a primary, especially, I wouldn't be surprised. Especially with June, because this the calendar year for the schools. Some schools are ending, some have ended, and they're going to finals. It's a challenging time. Yeah, I saw that, but it's still, so then the default is if we can't get that body there, call us. We'll help you out.
I also, one of the polling places that I went to, their inspector hadn't showed up that morning, and they were in disarray. They had gotten a replacement inspector, but their replacement inspector had never been an inspector before, and the Fed had not dropped off. Certainly, even when the Fed came out with the replacement supplies, they forgot to complete the provisional ballots, and the combination of all of that was incredibly stressful on the clerks. And when I walked in there, they didn't know who I was, but it was visible that it was chaos there, and that they were very upset, and they were talking about it very loudly. And so I don't know if there's a way, you probably don't have enough experienced inspectors to have them on standby, but it certainly did seem like it would have been ideal for an experienced inspector to be able to walk into that already delayed, stressful situation and help out. That's maybe impossible if you didn't have enough experienced inspectors, but it was certainly a visible issue at that polling place.
Yeah, and this was an election. This wasn't an election. This wasn't, you read it in the newspaper, in the news, 150%. That's 230,000 people. That's a lot of folks. That's a lot of stuff going on. And you're trying to make this all happen at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning. people show up maybe twice a year, you know, at most, like the only time they would do it in their lives. You talk about the kiosks being too big. They're big because, every year there's a new notion we got to put up a polling place, you know. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's an election. And so this election, you had some turnout, so you have a little more stress on the poll worker side, because let's say November of 13, no one probably showed up at some polling places until 9:30 in the morning, you know. So if you had no inspector or the clerks weren't there, then they had plenty of time to adjust. They wasn't going to stress, oh, we need to provide some water showing up.
Yeah.
Again, we would love to have, first of all, no inspectors call in sick. We love that, you know, but it happens, and then we try to, and that's the very first thing we do in the morning. We get there at 4:30, before 5 o'clock, and we're on the phone to check if someone called in sick, because we know that's our first issue of the day. The next issue is the polling place being open. And then we bring folks in, we train them up to be inspectors, and it's the first time. It's a lot of stuff to remember. That if you put them into a challenging situation, how they respond.
Yeah.
But while saying all that, the process usually within an hour or two gets set.
Yeah.
It's calm, and then the rest of the day, the procedures are good enough that people can vote. They can sign the roster, they can get red ballots, they can vote their ballots, the machines will work. Then you come into the day, and you got to close the polling places, and then and then we're trying to get people to provide additional assistance at those sites where inspectors or clerks are not sure how to close the polls. But no, the mornings are where that's where the rubber hits the road. And I'm not trying to explain it away. And I saw that actually. I saw that before I came down, and I agree. But at the same time, we respond. We respond pretty well, and it might be just like with the website. It's an hour and some minutes, and it's not perfect, whatever. But we respond. We get it going again. We put a PDF up, and we just keep going forward. So that's the thing with elections. There's no we're going to wait till tomorrow to do this. It has to happen. There's no don't show up right now. It has to happen. So you have to always be moving forward, and that's where our process is very successful. No matter the challenges that we have, it always moves forward. And in the end, it may not be right at the point in time people expected in the way they expected, but the service is provided. So, but I saw that, and it seemed like we had more cancellations on these. It might have been the Giants. I don't know. Hopefully everything on Giants. But it just seemed that we had more challenges getting the inspectors. We were pushing more towards the end than the past election. So.
One last minor comment, but one of the clerks asked when she found out who I was, said, "Oh, am I allowed to give feedback?" And she was talking about the street maps, which I think you started providing an election or two ago, so that if somebody's at the wrong polling place, there's now a map that you can pull out and say, "Here's where you should go." She would have loved to have sort of an X marks the spot on it instead of just, she said she was having a little trouble being specific with the voters about exactly where the polling place is. So that was, I told her I would pass it on.
Yeah, no, that stuff adds up. I appreciate it.
The thing to blame on the Giants is that they only win the World Series in years that have federal elections. Yeah. So if they could sometimes just do it in years where we have local elections, I think it would be less of a problem. So I had a bunch of stuff actually. Last June I was out at the warehouse looking at stuff, and some of the precinct services people invited/dared me to, in the next election, meaning this one, go down the week before and see what precinct services really does. Because what they do, which has always been sort of a vague intellectual concept to me for 12 years now, is the 100+ individual piece parts that have to get out to your polling place that, we inspectors deal with all the time, from extension cords and occasionally lamps and all of the big equipment that you expect to see, but dozens of ballpoint pens and 10 or so ballot marking pens, and on and on and on. It's in the 3 digits number of pieces other than ballot cards that have to get out there. And I've always just sort of intellectually understood it to be a pretty significant logistical challenge, but I've never, frankly, bothered to go down and watch it the week beforehand. So I did, and I went down, watched with the Director Arts, we watched the training that the new vendors who pack up all the stuff, 8 or 9 precincts worth of the gray bin, the Insight machine, and the red box that contains all the supplies for the polling place, all get stacked, up in what they call a pod and rolled on in specific order onto the trucks and secured. And it's, each bin, each Insight obviously has to get to the specific polling place that it is, designated for. There's no mix-up. It's a zero-fail sort of thing. So anyway, went down and watched some of that training, watched them load a few trucks, which is pretty cool. And then I met one of the trucks that I saw getting loaded. I saw it getting unloaded out at a polling place because I want to see how that works as well. And it was interesting. I mean, it's sort of exactly what you expect, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of care. Those machines, as we've all always said, that cockroaches and Insights will survive nuclear war. And those Insight machines are tough, but you can't just, bang them around. So it was really interesting. And everybody there, was paying attention and seemed to care. And like I said, the operations that we watched did really well. I thought that was interesting. And then, as an inspector this time, when I showed up, and I just sort of knew I had sort of a little bit more appreciation for all of this stuff just magically being there when I trudge in at 5:30. That was pretty cool. So. As to my inspector experiences, with the new kiosk, I mean, what else can you do? I liked the innovation and the creative thinking involved in it. I mean, we have to put them up. We didn't have to go to 4 languages this time, but we're going to have to eventually anyway. So, let's roll it out. I personally thought it was relatively easy to assemble. It's just sort of shake it, you pinch it by the sides and shake it out, and it kind of pops up. I think maybe if people try too hard, it gets difficult. I'm a master of not trying very hard, so I immediately solved that one. But it is big. Fortunately, the room we happened to be in could handle it, but I could imagine being in like a neighbor's garage, out there in the west half of the city. It probably would have been set up in the driveway for people, but it is what it is. I didn't have any problem with that at all. I was in District 2, meaning that we had 5 ballot cards, so we did do a withdrawal out of the gray bin. At some point, the Fed said, go ahead and do that, which I was glad to do because that's less to do at the end of the night, so that was fine with me. It's interesting. I've now been an inspector a few times in District 2, and, it's sort of random where I tend to get assigned, so I haven't always been in District 2, but this is my continued streak, and it only happens in District 2 where we get people coming in and saying, my spouse is sick, may I vote for my spouse, on behalf of my spouse. It's like, no, of course not. But so I asked, it always comes from people who come from one specific country of origin, of whom I happen to have someone on the clerk's staff. So I asked, hey, back in your country of origin, is that done? Is that a common policy that you can just sort of walk in and vouch for yourself that you're voting for your spouse who is sick and can't make it to the polls that day? Of course not. Nowhere can you do that. So I just found that interesting that in District 2 and only in District 2 do people ask if they can vote for their sick spouses, in my experience. I did have the one referral to the district's attorney, and this is an issue I've already raised with the director in email. So I had a clerk who had prepared in advance essentially a handwritten slate card for one specific party's preferences for all the candidates and all the answers to the ballot measures, state and local. And she did not have one for any of the other parties. So when a voter would come in who knows her and say, how should I vote for, or how should I vote on this election? How should I vote on this ballot? Or how should I vote for such and such party? She would sort of secretly hand this slip of paper. Now, and then the voter would hand it back. Now, here's the background. I got told about her, and I had her last June. And last June there was no issue, and I think in part because it's a June election, and nobody cared. So fine, I thought no issue, and I was sort of surprised to see that I had the same worker again. But that's nice. It's always nice to work with the same people. She's a very nice person. So I thought, okay, great. And along about 9:45 in the morning, I happened to look over and I saw a voter having just voted and come from the booth go over to her and sort of surreptitiously hand the slip of paper to her. And she sort of took a quick guilty look at me. And I said, let me see that. So she gave me the paper. And that is indeed what it was. It was one party's recommendations for all of the contests, state and local, and federal. So I called that in, and she was quickly, relieved of her duties. And it got referred to the district attorney's office for electioneering. And they've been in touch with me, so I'll be giving a formal statement to them, as well as the actual sheet of paper, which she asked for back. And I told her, I'm not giving this back. I consider this evidence of a crime. I'm not giving it back to you. And interestingly, she kept asserting that, but it was her privacy. It's her private vote. And I just sort of thought, well, after you've handed around to, half the local population, I'm not sure you get to claim privacy. I think it's not your best argument right now. So anyway, so that was that. The one question that I had written to the director, and I'm sure that we'll touch base on it at some point and we'll follow up, is because there was this knowledge of her reputation, how did she keep getting rehired? And that is, to me, a really important question. If you want to address it now, you can. If you want to do it later, we can. So it's up to you.
Yeah, so her first election wasn't in 1999, as you thought it was in 2001.
Okay. So she said 1999.
And we had one instance, I think 4 years ago, where someone called in, might have Fed, that she was, I think she was. In 2010, she was filling out ballots for a couple. There was one call. So then we sent the Fed, and the Fed spoke to that person. And then there was no other comment for us that day regarding this particular clerk filling out ballots or having any other issues. And we spoke to her. There was no issue. And then there was no other comments, negative comments on her at all, other than that one since 2001. And then nothing at all since 2010. So other than that one instance in 2010 and then your call election day, we had no indication that she was doing anything improper at the polls.
So what was the 2010 situation? Was that the filling out the ballots for people?
We had a call that she was filling out some ballots for a couple. Yeah, and so then we addressed it at that point.
Well, I was specifically told of this propensity in June, verbally. So if you're referring to what's documented, that could well be true.
That's all that I have.
Okay.
So all the poll worker feedback we received, all the field election deputy feedback, voter calls, I mean, we just had that one instance. And then the second one would be your call on election day.
Okay. All right.
And what was the specific instruction that you got?
Watch out, because she fills out a secret, little paper advocating for one party and will give it to her friends and stuff who come in.
By whom told you that?
Somebody within the department. I'm not going to say a name, but I'll get you that name. I'll get you that name as well if you're curious. But we'll move forward with that investigation because that's troublesome to me. Then things went pretty well. We were relatively busy. I thought we had the usual, ton of drop-offs of vote by mails. We had more provisionals than I typically see, but it's fine. Everybody met the definition of needing a provisional. It's fine. That all went fine. The only frustrating thing to me, and this has never happened to me before, at the end of the night we were 10 ballot cards over. I have no explanation for how we ended up over. We counted everything again, and it came out exactly 10 over again. So it's got to be some counting error, some mistake, because I don't think 2 voters brought in 5 cards and brought them. So we ended up 10 over somehow. It's got to be a counting error. So there was another thing I was going to mention. Yes, on Commissioner Rowe's point. So we did have this situation with, and I emailed you about this as well. We had a couple contests, citywide contests, where we're required to have ranked choice voting, where there's 1 candidate and 2 candidates. So it isn't. The algorithm never applies, but we still have to, lay out and do the ballot layout and all of that, because what if there's a bunch of write-ins or whatever who qualify and all that stuff. And I understand all that. But so the Insight was programmed to reject the ballot cards if there's no vote on it. Was also doing it if the voter voted, like in the 1 candidate contest, 1 person running unopposed. If they voted for the same person all 3 times, the Insight was kicking that back too. And it's kind of like, the voter was following instructions. So anyhow, but it gets kicked back, and so we had all of that stuff going on, with the person that immediately yanks it out, and it's like, well, so we were 3-keying it to override for, people upon, checking, was this what you meant to do? Was this, so yeah, fine. However, the polling place of the precinct adjacent to mine to the south was having the same issues that you saw, and the other people were talking about and that I had, except their 3-key didn't work. And so what they were doing was they spoiled all those ballot cards, which is a ton of them, because a lot of people do that. In a 1-person contest, they'll vote the same person in columns 1, 2, and 3. And void those ballot cards and make the voter fill out a new one only listing choice 1, and then the machine would accept it. And I just felt sorry for that they had to go through it. And I know that polling place was sort of struggling anyway. I think they had sort of an inexperienced inspector, and and our Fed had all the usual places to be, and all of that. And I think they were in a tough spot. And so to me, it's a combination of a bunch of things. Number one, I would like to see RCV, sort of, I think we have enough experience with it now, and it's sort of matured enough that it's now time to sort of take a look and see, how the election ordinance could be amended so that if by such and such a date, if by the time you got to order the cards and, do the layout and stuff, if there's only 1 candidate, then it's declared not a ranked choice or something. I predict I might get an earful about this at public comment time, but you only get 3 minutes. But or something that means we don't have to do the huge amount of real estate on the card, coming back to the smaller packet issue, as well as how to program the machines. And I know that's been an ongoing dialogue since the advent of ranked choice voting, is, should the machines kick it back for this? Should it kick it back for that? If somebody votes in a multiple candidate contest and somebody ranks the same person 1 and 2 and then a different person for number 3, should the machine kick that out? And, and so on. This I feel like needs to be revisited, because it's not rare that we get 1 and 2 person 1 and 2 candidate contests. And it's not really the province of the Department of Elections to weigh in on that, other than to give the data that's situationally, operationally, here's the difference it would make. And I know that a lot of polling places, just based on the randomness of what I got assigned, the one behind me and the one Commissioner Rowe visited, all having this same general issue. I'm sure that you saw it a lot. I actually scanned through the iris to see whether there were a lot of precincts, and it's not clear from the iris that it was, it didn't show up that way. But have you heard anecdotally whether that was a big issue where a lot of people had to have card 5 spoiled and redone? Well, it should show up in the canvas, I would think, because you got all the stacks of all the spoiled cards, and if there's this many card 5s that got spoiled and this many card 2s, then that would be some sort of indicator that something was wrong with that card, or it's counted.
I'm sorry, maybe.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I want to go back to the anecdote that Commissioner Matthews related about that full worker, that clerk. The DA is going to do their job. That's their jurisdiction, prosecute criminal matters, but we have a job to do too. And I want to bird dog this. I want to figure out what happened. And I'm going to ask you, Director Arns, to give us a report at the next commission hearing. I want to figure out why there's apparently a written record and that doesn't reflect what the department knew about this clerk, because that seemed unacceptable. And I'm not saying that anyone did anything wrong, but I just want to figure out a way to make sure this never happened again.
And I'll get with you and I'll tell you what I know, and you can go from there. Commissioner Giordano.
Just want to follow up on there were comments about the error messages with the RCV ballots. Is whether the machine displays an error message, whether it displayed an error message for a particular configuration, is that something spelled out in the ordinance, or do you have leeway in terms of how you configure that?
No, it's not the ordinance, it's not the charter. So the way the system is programmed, if one contest is RCV, then all similar contests are RCV in the same position on the card. So card 5, where the supervisors contests were, so there were some that were the front side, card 4, I can't remember this now. So the issue is that we combined one candidate contest on one side and the RCV for supervisor on the back side, if I remember correctly. And so, but not, so on the front side of the card, since every precinct, every voter in the city received the same contest with the same one candidate for that contest, the coding was just fine. But for the supervisors contest on the back side, some of the contests had one candidate, some had more than one candidate, but all of them had to be programmed as ranked choice in the same manner. So the contests weren't programmed. So with the one candidate RCV contest for public defender, for instance, the 3 columns were actually coded as separate contests. So column 1 is one contest, column 2 is one contest, column 3 is one contest. We could not do that for the ranked choice ballot that had just one candidate, because there were other ranked choice contests for supervisor that had more than one candidate. So that's where the problem was coming.
So you're saying it's a limitation of the technology that the RCV contests on different sides of the card have to be configured the same?
It's a limitation of the coding, not the technology, but the coding, and it's a limitation of the certification of that coding to go back and make that change, right?
Okay.
Meaning the Secretary of State.
Yeah. So, there's still the issue of how to mark the cards, how to format the cards, when by E88, which is the deadline for nominations, you have one person that's, then 27, I can't remember, is the deadline for write-ins. There's that gap.
Yeah.
All that will still exist. How we handle that will continue no matter what the coding and the certification is for the voting system.
Yeah, it's a big gap. Thank you. Any other commissioner comments or observations? That may I invite Mr. Gerard Gleason, former commissioner, to come give his input on the November 4th, 2014 election.
Yeah, just a couple of things. I was inspector at my usual spot, 9112 on 12th Avenue. One of my usual clerks was sick, so I actually had to have a new crew, and it actually worked really well. The colored bags are really helpful, especially with the students. And I'd say I went to the training, I saw that kiosk thing, and as I walked out, I sidewalled it. I said, I hope it works better than the inflate-a slide on the evacuation chute on the plane. But it worked fine. I could see the issue. I thought it was very readable. So, and I'm in a big spot in the schools, but I can see I've worked in a postage stamp size garage, so I can see that could be an issue. One thing I wanted to talk about, I had my usual experience with somebody coming in and said they would register a DMV. As many of you know, my own son happened to register in June one year. October he wasn't on there. And one thing I've learned from the election is that I had a couple a few years ago came in. The husband's registered, the wife is not on the roster. They're like incensed about this. I had her vote provisional, but I had a note to the director. I sent it down, and Director Arntz researched this. I came and met with him, and oddly enough, she was registered 5 blocks away. So what I learned about that is, you never know. Let's check. I had the woman call the voter assistance hotline, give your name, any variation in your name, your birth date, any address you may be. And I'm hearing her talking to the voter assistance line, and it's the sort of Bob Newhart conversation. I'm not hearing exactly what the department's saying to her, but the conversation when she kind of got incensed, what do you mean I can register today and vote next election? And I told her, tell them thank you, that's not the end of the road here. You can get a court order. So she hung up. She's very interested now in the court order. Now, how do you get the court order? I'm like, well, I know it's part of election code. I think it's 4212 or something like that, because it specifically mentions the DMV registration, so they can go get a day of court order. So I called the precinct helpline for poll workers, and I said, I got a voter here that needs a court order. Where do they go? And the person who answered said, well, I'm not sure that's going to happen. And I'm like, well, she's going to tell it to the judge, so where does she go? That person wanted to talk to the voter, and we get back to the Bob Newhart conversation. They talk about the DMV in Daly City, blah, blah, blah. I finally, since it was my phone, I took it back and I said, where does she go? And it took about 4 or 5 minutes for the department to come back and give me the answer, come down here to 48. So this woman was going to do it, and I was curious about this because this never happened. I said, would you come back and tell me? So she came down, and she came to 48. She fills out some form. She goes over to the courthouse, and she told me there were 4 other people there. And this is one thing I want to point out. She said that they had availability of a judge there and it actually wasn't a judge, it was a clerk, 11 till noon and 1:30 to 4. Now, I've seen these Jimmy Stewart movies where the judge gets woken up in his house with a nightshirt and a goofy-ass hat. And I think there should be a judge there all day long, or at least a clerk. I mean, I couldn't believe this. So she said she sat there for an hour and a half with these other people. One person told her, hey, I'm unemployed, but I wouldn't have time to do this otherwise. So anyway, she did get the court order, came over, and she said she got the vote at City Hall downstairs here. One thing I was curious about, though, she comes over with the court order, and I know what the process is probably that they give her a vote by mail ballot, and then they adjudicate that later and check it out. Well, wait, what happens to that court order? I'm curious. Does that go with it so that it doesn't turn into, oh, this person's not registered? I'm not sure what the process is. But I really think that the voter assistance hotline really needs to know about this. End is the court order, and offer that. And I know that, these phone banks are staffed by temporary people, and the airlines have the same thing where you get different stories from different people because there's a mountain of info and data. But I would expect the voter assistance hotline to at least know that, and particularly the line helping the poll workers know where to go, because I had no idea where the court order is. I just know about the issue.
Let me ask you a pause right there, because I actually do want to ask the director that. So it's an interesting question. So what does happen with the court order when somebody goes over to the courthouse, gets the order, comes back here? I assume like Gerard does, that they go downstairs to the desk and they get the vote by mail / early voting, thing, correct for their ballot type and all of that stuff. Then what does happen to the order? Does that get stapled on, or the thing just gets thrown in with all the others because there's a court order?
We keep it, we file it, but then also we enter into that person's record that was a court order for the registration. So we don't give a ballot unless someone's registered. So it's not a matter to get a ballot, we don't count it later.
Right.
But we do put in the record that was a court order registration on election day. So.
All right, cool. Yeah, well, one of the things that I noticed in going through the public correspondence, a whole bunch of people had written in, the usual percentage of people had written in saying, I swear I either registered or updated via the DMV, as we've all been talking about for years. And as this commission has tried to get the Secretary of State to, take our calls or answer our letters or anything on this issue, and so far, nothing. And that if somehow, and I don't know if it would be KCO or just enough registrars around the state or whatever, would tell the Secretary of State, hey, we are getting an increasing number of court orders, based on people's claims that they either registered or updated through DMV, but somehow that data didn't get communicated to us and our files were not updated. So, there's still the glitch in the system. I very much like the idea of getting judges to do this, to put, some more pressure on the Secretary of State's office to do something about it. But what I want to say about the public correspondence, it was hit or miss whether the form answer to them notified them of this court order possibility or not. And I would say that most of the responses were here's the link to update your registration, or here's the link to register to vote so you'll be all set for the next election. Versus people who did get informed. Well, there is such a thing as a court order that you could avail yourself of that process. Maybe you will, maybe you won't receive one, but you could pursue it. And honestly, that's not okay with me. That different voters with the same problem got different advice on how to get their vote counted this election. And it's sort of, what Gerard experienced in person at his. I didn't have this at mine, but he had it at his. And so reading through the public correspondence sort of concerned me. So is there any operational concerns that your department or any department of elections you think would have with advising voters, hey, go get a court order, here's how to do it?
No, for us, we can provide the form, so it's not like we have to.
Yeah, you don't have to do it.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So obviously there was training at the phone bank to inform voters of what order. So it was part of the package when the temporary employees came in the department. It was part of the information I had before them, but it seems that it was inconsistently told to the voters, but it was available to them. It was part of the training.
And is it fairly new, like that piece of the training, like advising voters about the availability of a court order?
At least the last couple of elections.
Yeah, and I would just like to see that consistently applied, because I would like to see judges consistently grant them, and the Secretary of State's office hear about it from 58 registrars. Go ahead, George.
Well, I was just going to say, it'd be good if the department lets the voters know, and it'd be good if the commission or somebody does something about the banker's hours over there. It's no good to tell people to come down there, and my person cooled their heels for an hour and a half. I just find that unacceptable. I know the courts have problems with money, but it was a clerk. It wasn't even a judge. And I think they could know it's election day and they got staffed at. And widely staffed at, hours-wise. Anyway, that's one thing I want to bring up.
You should buy a black robe and a wig. Go sit over there all day on election.
There's an interesting thing online about it, because some counties like Santa Cruz, it's basically a rubber stamp. They come in, they'll give it to you. There are other counties where you actually have to show up with a piece of paper from the DMV, or the judge won't do it. So it's not, from what I've read about it, it's not evenly applied. San Francisco's apparently seemed pretty easy because it's a clerk going here. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks.
That's a good follow-up question.
Please.
Director Arms, do you have any idea how many court orders are issued per election? Ballpark?
Yeah, I mean, top of my head, no.
No? Do you think it's more than 100 or less?
No.
Okay.
maybe 10, 15, 20.
Interesting. All right. Any other commissioner comments, thoughts, observations on any of this before we open to public comment? Commissioner John? Okay. Is there public comment on this? Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, President Matthews and Commissioners. My name is David Carey. Thank you, and thanks to Director Arndt for what so far appears to have been largely a successful election again. And thanks for looking at ways to improve. One area that now needs improvement is the scheduling of the first preliminary RCV tallies. In 2012, the Department's practice advanced to publishing the first RCV tallies within an hour after the close of polls on election night. Among many other benefits, that change increased the transparency of San Francisco's RCV elections. To quote the Commission's policy, transparency in the administration of elections requires that the disclosure of vote counts be made public as soon as reasonably practicable after the close of polls, end of quote. Transparency is one of the foundations of trustworthy and credible elections. So it was with some dismay that when I read the Department's press release issued 2 days before Election Day that announced that the first RCV tallies would be delayed until the end of reporting results on election night. This backsliding was not only a failure of departmental performance, it also resulted from a failure of Commission oversight. And to be quite frank, it was a failure on my part not to be following this issue a little bit more closely, because I've worked with the Commission in past years on it. So I and others are interested in hearing not only an assessment of why these failures occurred, but especially an assessment of what can and will be done to prevent a recurrence in the future. Simply put, stop hiding votes on election night and stop treating RCV votes as second-class votes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Donaldson.
Good evening, Commissioners. I did not work this election, unfortunately, but I did want to also reinforce what David Carey said. I think it was a really important step to release the results, the RCV results, as part of the early reporting, the immediate reporting at the close of polls in 2012. And I think that practice should continue, and hopefully at some point in the future we'll be able to get ballot image files not just for RCV but for all elections and get them with the release of those votes. But certainly for transparency, that was a great step forward, and I think that should be continued and should somehow be put into the policy for the city for future elections. Thank you.
And we thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none. Thanks. Well, under the BOPEC's original jurisdiction, so it doesn't require a motion to commit at this time, I know BOPEC will be taking up a closer look and a more detailed look at some of the issues at its December meeting, bringing back a recommendation whether to make a finding on behalf of the full commission that this election substantially complied with the election plan. So thank you, BOPEC. Item 5, I expect this one to be pretty short. Commissioners' reports, given that the bulk of everything's been the election. Any commissioners' reports? Seeing Commissioner Jordanek?
Yeah, I just had not a report, but a question about some things related to, well, Commissioner things we've talked about in the past. Wanted to ask, did we ask the Board of Supervisors to pass the waiver for this past election? Do you know?
I believe so. I know that I forwarded it. And I think I forwarded you guys when I did so.
Okay, I didn't see the email
Okay.
on that.
I'll double check.
Okay. And also, a few months ago at our August meeting, we approved a motion to send a letter to the Board of Education. Did we send that letter?
Has not been sent yet. It's been kicking around the editing. The editing has been very difficult to find the exact right tone. I've been looking at the Board of Education's agendas, and they haven't yet, I think, taken it up.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So you're going to wait until they take up the...
Well, no, I'll get it done by the, next meeting certainly, but the editing of that to get it right has been more challenging than I thought when I brought up this idea.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Any other things related to commissioner reports? Seeing none. Public comment? Seeing none. Thank you. Item 6, Director's Report.
Well, as far as preparations for elections, we were pretty much done in preparing for the election. So there is the partial tax election that's like $1.4 billion that will be starting December 1st. Departmental activities right now, a lot of the folks are down at the warehouse finishing up the canvas, doing the 1% manual tally. We're also archiving the envelopes, and other materials for selection. And we're trying to tweet and Facebook the processes. We tried really focused going into Election Day, then coming out of Election Day as well. So people would get a sense of what goes on, not just Election Day, but before and after. So even things as exciting as organizing envelopes by precinct order, we tweeted that today and boxing them up, so we'll continue. So right now, I expect to certify, if not by the end of tomorrow, then by Friday morning. And then we've already started to plan our debriefing meetings for going forward. So that's where we are.
And hang on, I'm looking for the Twitter feed. And so we have no June election next year, correct? And so the next election will be November of next year.
Correct.
So we'll have some time to do all of this. Some of this, these issues that we've raised tonight, we'll have the time to sort of delve into them. One of the things I did want to ask, obviously the election has been, occupying all of the oxygen, but any further word on the warehouse or, new location?
Yeah.
Wouldn't expect so, but thought I would ask. Very good. Commissioner questions? Commissioner John.
Yeah, thank you. Just one question on the new equipment acquisition. As I recall, we purchased, the department purchased a butterfly machine. I think that's how it was described. Just wanted to see your assessment of how well it worked on election day and whether it was worth the money.
Yeah, it was worth the money. We actually started using them 11 days before the election to open up the envelopes. And we'll seek to buy 2 more actually going in this next budget cycle. So they work pretty well.
And what's the need for 2 more? Just because 2 more workers could do it simultaneously? Is it
capacity?
Well, yeah, but like simultaneous capacity, so you could do it instead of 2 at a time, 4 at a time, right? All at the same time. All right, cool. Any other commissioner comments, questions for the director? Seeing none, any public comment?
David Carey here again. In terms of some of the things that need to be done to complete this election, one of the things I'd like to encourage is that the certification of vote totals include a certification of the actual RCD tallies, and that they include a certification of the RCD tallies for all of the RCD contests. In the past, sometimes I think sometimes only the first choices as marked have been the only part that's been certified for RCD contests, and that's not something that's actually recognized at all as a meaningful total in the city charter. Thank you very much.
Thanks. We don't typically do this, but Mr. Carey, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
In a 1-person or 2-person contest, would you consider that the statement that you just made, do you consider that as part of the RCV contest, just in your typical usage of the term?
I can understand perhaps making an exception for particularly a one-person contest, but and a particularly one-person contest in which there are no qualified write-in candidates. But I think that there have been other cases where there are competitive elections among multiple candidates, and where the first choices are not indicative of who the winner would be.
Sure. But you're talking about 3 or more candidates.
So if there's a particular value to making exceptions, I'm comfortable with that. Yes.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks very much. Any further public comment? Roger, was that you? Okay. Very well. Thank you. We now come to item 7, which we're going to move into closed session. So I bid all our members of the public, which for us is a huge groundswell.
Hey, you need to shut the door?
Yeah, sure. We say goodnight and thank you. Director, you're free to go as well if you wish. And we will stay with Josh. We're going to need to switch audio files. We do need to take the motion to move. And I believe this is your colleague.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll meet you in just a second. First, for item number 7, may I have a motion to move into closed session?
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any commissioner discussion on this? Comments, and let us have a vote. Commissioner Rowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Jordanek?
Yes.
I also vote yes. Commissioner Savant?
Yes.
Commissioner Yu?
Yes.
Commissioner John?
Yes.
And it is unanimous that we are in closed session. So, and so now we're back in open session. Do I need to go actually open the door for the nobody who's out there?
Well, we might as well just...
All right, thanks. Moving on to item 8, discussion possible action regarding items for future agendas. Hearing none.
I wanted to ask you.
Chris, it's 5 after 9. Yes, go ahead, sir.
So I wanted to ask, is the president's annual report?
Thank you, Cecilia.
The president's annual report, is that something that we would discuss at next month's meeting, or?
Typically, the presidents do that in January or
But
February.
if you're not, won't be here.
Then I'll owe you a report.
Okay.
Okay. Seriously, that matters to me. We are adjourned. It is 9:06. I thank you all very much.